Last week, we introduced Fed Talks. Fed Talks. Anybody remember what that is? Faith, encouragement, deliverance. Get the fingers to work. Faith, encouragement, deliverance. Fed Talks. Not TED Talks. Not talks by a guy named Ted. Not talks by a guy named Jim. Fed Talks. And what these are is these are conversations Jesus has with usually an individual. There may be some where it's a couple of people and like we've seen, but mainly it's just an intimate conversation Jesus has with somebody, and ultimately what we'll see is that conversation changes their life. Changes their life. So today let's read from John chapter 1, verses 45 through 51. John 1, 45 through 51. It says there, well, let's start at 43. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. And Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael said to him, I love this, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Can anything good come out of Nazareth? And Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said to him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" And Jesus answered him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." And Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered him, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Interesting conversations. Philip and Nathanael, just a couple of Jewish guys hanging out that bumped into Jesus. Apparently, at least Philip did. Now, Philip we read a little bit more about. Nathanael almost totally disappears from the scene. He ends up becoming one of the 12 that we never read about. He's here in one other place, I think in John chapter 10. We're not even going to go there because it's not pertinent to what we're talking about. But he does show up in the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptics, probably under the name of Bartholomew. But again, that's all we read. He comes on the list. Anytime there's a list where the 12 are named, Nathanael or Bartholomew is on the list. This is really the only story outside of one minor thing, which he has one line somewhere where he shows up in the story. And yet, I think we can assume because he becomes one of the 12, because he goes out preaching, his life has changed. And both Philip and Nathanael, and they do incredible things. But here at the starting point of his relationship with Jesus is his life walk with the King by his own words. "You are the King." It seems pretty mundane, pretty simple, pretty uneventful. There is a common thing to what we talked about last week, where we were looking at Andrew and Peter and that clan, where Jesus invites Andrew to come and see. And we see that line again here in this story. Only this time it's not an invitation from Jesus, it's an invitation from Philip. Philip had been, and I don't know where or when, but we're not told in the text, but Philip had apparently been following Jesus and watching Jesus and listening to Jesus. And he sees Nathanael and says, hey, come and see. We found the Messiah. Come and see. And I think it's not an accident that those two lines show up in John in proximity like this. It's as if John wants to see, it doesn't matter who invites you, but you've got to go hear this guy. You've got to learn about this guy, Jesus. Whether you hear it right from his mouth or you hear it from somebody else, you've got to come and see. And that was the main point of last week. Jesus gently and humbly invites, and he's ready to begin with you, wherever you are, whatever you are. Contrary to what I've heard from numbers of people, the roof will not cave in if you come to see and hear about Jesus. It's a pretty solid roof, and Jesus knows your past already. It's okay to come and see. Well, the story actually starts 2 days prior with John the Baptist revealing who Jesus is in chapter 1, verses 29 through 34. And his disciples are pointed to Jesus then. And last week they were invited, as I said, to come and see. And then we get to the next day, the day of our text. Jesus finds Philip and says to Philip, follow me. Follow me. Now, he's not giving him directions to Quick Trip or, to Speed, Super America or anything like that. Follow me means I want to be your rabbi and I want you to be my disciple. This is not just let's just check it out and see casually. This is an invitation to change your life. Follow me. To be a disciple is to do everything in your power to try to be like your teacher, your rabbi. So he says to Philip, follow me. And Philip goes. And Philip goes and follows him. I want to center more on Nathanael, though. But what Philip does, similar to Andrew, is he invites someone else. Andrew goes and finds his brother who overshadows him big time. Andrew becomes sort of a postscript in the rest of Scripture, while Peter takes center stage almost from that point through half of the book of Acts. Here, Nathanael is the second person, and he's invited, and neither one of them really become prominent figures in terms of the story that's told in Scripture. But as I said earlier, you can be sure both of them were changed personally, and they had an impact on others. So Philip finds Nathanael and says in verse 45, we have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote. Now, that may not mean a whole lot to you, but if you were a Jew and you said, we found the guy Moses has been talking about, and all the prophets have been talking about, that's what we call a big deal. That's a big deal. Moses was their primary spokesman for God. He gave them the law, which directed their lives. He gave them the sacrifices, which brought them to God. The prophets were there to tell them when they're off course and how they should serve. It's a big deal. We have found the guy. It's Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Okay, now if you say, I found the guy, and he's from Chopir. Anybody know where Chopir is? A little tiny town just outside of Beloit. Anybody know where Beloit is? At least it's on the signs. Joanne, when I met Joanne, she lived in Chopir. But unless you lived near Chopir or around the area, you say, Chopir, where in the world is that? Nazareth was kind of like that. They may have heard it. It's not to say that Nazareth was this terrible place. It was just a no place. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? I mean, really? You're telling me the Messiah, and he came from Chopir? Nazareth. Yes. That's what I'm saying. And he's the son of Joseph. Oh, Joseph! Never heard of him. Unless I had some carpentry work done in the neighborhood, then you might have heard of him. He's a simple man. He's I'm not going to say he's a nobody, but he's an unknown. Just as Nazareth was an unknown. So, if you're trying to get somebody to follow Jesus and impress him with his resume, he's from Nazareth and he's the son of Joseph. That's Philip's resume that he presents to Nathanael. Nathanael's not buying it. Can anything good? Well, the truth is, there were 3 or 4 prophets that came out of Nazareth. He wasn't the only one that had this reaction. The Pharisees had a similar reaction when they found out where Jesus was from. It's like, well, Nazareth? Oh. Nothing good comes out of Nazareth. Well, yeah, Elijah, Elisha, one of the two. There's 3 or 4 prophets came out of there. But it was just a place. Nobody said, oh, I've got a week off. You know what? Let's take the team of camels up to Nazareth. No, you don't go there. It's not a destination. It's just a place. But Philip is not deterred, and he says to Nathanael, come and see. No, don't come and see Nazareth. This is not a tourism advertising slogan. By the way, have you heard Nebraska's slogan? I got 2 kids that live in Nebraska. And their latest tourism slogan is, Nebraska, it's not for everybody. I love that. Nazareth, not for everybody. He's not saying, come and see Nazareth. You'll see it's worth coming to, and surely somebody. No, he's saying, come and check out this guy of whom Moses and the prophets wrote. There's his resume. There's his resume. And so, Nate heads on his way. He goes with them. This is different from Andrew's story a little bit. Jesus invites, as I said, and here Philip invites. But either way, the key is to find out who Jesus is. So, let's back up just a little bit and look at verse 46. Nathanael says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And Philip says, of course, come and see. Let's examine that skepticism a little more. It just might be difficult to believe Moses and the prophets spoke of a guy that spent nearly his whole life in Nazareth. Okay, where's the time he said, like the Apostle Paul, sitting at the feet of Gamaliel, growing up, being trained and being prepared? This guy was being prepared to do a dado cut or a miter cut. He was being prepared to put joints together and to plane and smooth wood. Unless you think some believe that carpenter is more like a stone worker. So in that case, he's trained to chisel and chip away at things. It's hard to be critical of his skepticism when Jesus doesn't have all the stuff you'd expect a highly touted rabbi to have. Okay? And yet, Philip's not deterred. Come and see. So he does. And in verse 47, Jesus speaks and says, Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, and he says, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." No guile, I think some translations the King James uses. He's not saying Nathanael's sinless. He's saying, here's an honest man. By the way, the word guile or deceit is connected to the name of Jacob. Jacob, remember the guy who cheated his parents out of the birthright, cheated his brother out of the birthright, and his parents out of the blessing as well. And then he went off to run away to escape his brother who was wanting to kill him, and he tricks his uncle into developing great fortune. And so Jacob lives up to his name of supplanter or cheater until he has that night where he sleeps on the rock and dreams of the ladder and has that wrestling with God, with the angel. And his character changes and his name changes. He's no longer Jacob. He's Israel, the father of a nation. So here's an Israelite, Nathanael, a guy who's honest, not like even Jacob, one of our leaders. And how does Nathanael react to that? How does he react to that? Look at verse 48. How do you know me? Yeah, is this one of those shyster tricks, where you just say generic things and then you get accused, and you've seen those things, and how do you know me? Well, Jesus says, before you came, I saw you sitting under the tree, the fig tree. And there's a little story we could talk about in terms of sitting under the fig tree. A lot of significant things happened while people were sitting under fig trees. Historically biblical things, but we don't have time for that. Look it up if you want. It's a fun read. I saw you under the fig tree. And Nate's response is rabbi. Notice, even though Philip has introduced him as the Messiah, the teacher, the one that Moses and all the prophets spoke to him, Nathanael doesn't offer any kind of honor name for him. He just says, how do you know me? And when he says this, Nathanael says, Rabbi, teacher. In other words, I'm ready to follow you, as Philip is going to follow him. And he does. And he does. Rabbi. There was no address of honor at first, but his view of Jesus changes because he came to see for himself. And Jesus says, oh, Nate. You are going to see way bigger things than this. Way bigger things than this. You are actually going to see heaven opened and angels ascending and descending on me. Oh man, that'd be cool, wouldn't it? Nate is ready to follow. Here's my point in all of this, in this story. Long before Nathanael was pursuing Jesus, Jesus was pursuing Nathanael. Before you were here, I saw you under the tree. Jesus was pursuing Nathanael long before Nathanael was pursuing Jesus. Jesus knew Nate's heart. He's been watching him, learning of him. I thought we were supposed to do that of Jesus. Yes, we are. But guess what? Jesus is doing that of us. He's watching you, learning you, knowing you, seeking your heart. He knew his heart. Here's a man who is no guile. He knew he was praying. That was a typical thing to do under a fig tree. He knew about him, and he was meditating about, who knows? Jesus did what he was meditating about while under the fig tree. And I think even beyond that, I think he knew you first too. I think he was pursuing you. It's not the only case of that. Look in John chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. Remember the man born blind? They're brought to Jesus, and Jesus heals him. He makes a little mud, puts it on his eyes, and go wash in the pool. And he washes the pool. I can see, I can see. And then trouble starts because it was the Sabbath, and he's taken there, and the Jews, who did this to you? Who healed on the Sabbath? And he says, I don't know. I was blind back then. I couldn't see him. So they bring the parents in. Tell us, was this guy born blind? Yeah, he was blind, but who healed him? We don't know. We weren't around. And there's some really funny and powerful things in there. It's like, tell me who did this. And he certainly couldn't have done that, because a man that would heal on the Sabbath can't be from God. Where is he from? There's that thing, come and see. Where's he from? Question. And he said, well, that's an odd thing that you don't know. He cured me of my blindness from birth, by the way. Something no one has ever heard about before, yet you don't know where he's come from. And they put him out of the temple. But there's a question there, because they think somebody must have sinned because this blindness happened to him. Was it he or his parents? That was the question they were asking. Did his parents sin? And are they being punished because of their sin, so God gives them a blind child? Or did the child sin so that he's born blind? How does a child sin in the womb? He's born blind. These are the questions I have. Their questions were not like that. Who sinned so that he was born blind? And Jesus says, neither his parents nor he sinned. He was born blind so that on this day you can see the glory of God through this man. I think Jesus knew that man before that man knew Jesus. And I think he knows you. I think he knows you and knew you long before you knew him. And he pursued you. Look at 1 John chapter 4, verse 10. And this is love. Not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Who loved who first? Look at verse 19 of that same chapter. We love, who knows the rest? Because he first loved us. Now, just because God loves us doesn't mean we automatically love. But I think it's important to know that wherever you are in your walk, He is pursuing you. He wants your heart. He knows you. He's preparing things for you. And He loves you. He loved us first. He saw us first. He invited us first. So guess who's ready to welcome you? Jesus is. Jesus is. God is. Yes, you're right. Jesus always goes first. Always goes first. He knows us as He knew Nate. And He waits for you.